From the late 1990s, a wave of sending children overseas for a better education began to surge. Countless fathers accepted staying behind in Australia, working themselves to the bone to send money to their wives and children living abroad. In May 2003, amidst this melancholic social backdrop, David Anderson passed away. When he was discovered, beside him were only empty whiskey bottles, sleeping pills, and a single family photograph. Neighbors mentioned that living apart from his wife and daughter had made him intensely lonely. Based on this, investigators closed the case, concluding it was the suicide of a solitary father. The life of a man who had sacrificed everything for his family was ultimately summarized in 2 words: lonely death. But David Anderson knew better. He had sensed his own demise and prepared one final insurance policy for his daughter. It wasn't a monetary payout, but a cassette tape, a recording of the entire truth about his death, to be sent to his daughter after 7 years. In 2010, when the Walkman from a box of old junk began to play, his daughter couldn't believe her ears. The voice of an ABC newsreader echoed from the cheap tape. The 7 p.m. news broadcast from May 13th, at the very moment he was thought to have died, confirmed that in that room he had not been alone. A message sent from the deceased across time, and within it, the naked face of malevolent desires. What was the final message that a father had traded his life to send to his daughter? The story of that day is about to begin. On the night of the 24th of December 2010, Christmas Eve, Sydney Airport was swarming with people returning home. As the doors to the arrivals hall slid open, Chloe Anderson took a deep breath of the crisp Sydney winter air. Finally, back in Australia, Chloe whispered, a small white cloud of breath puffing from her lips. The scent of home, after 7 years away, was both strange and deeply comforting. She pulled her collar up high and boarded the bus to the city center. The old apartment block in Newtown. It had been so long. Watching the Sydney streets flash by the window, she smiled sadly. Even as a 26-year-old woman, fresh from completing her Master of Business Administration in Boston, her feelings about returning to her grandmother's house were not entirely of excitement. Chloe stopped in front of a time-worn, old brick apartment building at the end of a small laneway. Nan must have aged so much. Her finger trembled as she pressed the doorbell. From inside, the sound of slow, shuffling footsteps echoed. "Who is it?" Her grandmother's voice, filtering through the door, made Chloe's throat tighten. "Nan, it's me. It's Chloe." As soon as she spoke, the securely locked door swung wide open. Her Nan, her face a canvas of wrinkles and her eyes welling with tears, quickly grasped her granddaughter's hand. "Oh my goodness, it's my Chloe. Look how you've grown. Nan, are you keeping well? Any aches or pains?" Chloe hugged her grandmother tightly. Her Nan's back seemed so much smaller than it had 7 years ago, a fact that filled her with a pang of sorrow. In the living room, the 2 of them sipped warm cups of tea and caught up. In the middle of their conversation, Nan placed her hands on her knees and pushed herself up. "Chloe, dear, wait here a moment. Your mother left some of your father's things with me for safekeeping." Nan made her way towards the garage, out the back. Hearing the words, "your father's things," Chloe's heart constricted. Painful memories resurfaced of how she couldn't even return for her father's funeral, forced to stay in America at her mother's insistence. Here it is. It's been sitting in this corner of the garage for 7 years. Her Nan struggled to carry a dust-covered cardboard box and set it down. Chloe's hands trembled as she tore off the packing tape. The first thing she saw was an old, worn-out Walkman. "Nan, what's this?" Chloe asked, picking up a cassette tape. "I'm not sure, dear. Your mother just asked me to hold on to it. I've never opened it." As if in a trance, Chloe put batteries in the Walkman and inserted the tape. She pressed play. After a soft whirring and hiss, a familiar voice she had longed to hear spoke out. "I miss my family." Though the pronunciation was hesitant, it was unmistakably the voice of her father. David Anderson. On the tape, he repeated the phrase several times. "How are you doing, my daughter? Are you well?" The tears Chloe had been holding back for so long now streamed down her face. Only now did she realize her father had been painstakingly teaching himself English late at night, just so he could speak with her. "He loved you so dearly," Nan said, gently rubbing her granddaughter's back. Chloe wiped her tears and shakily flipped the tape to side B. At first, it was more English practice, but then the atmosphere abruptly changed. "Chloe, Dad's just recording a few words to send you, so you know how I'm getting on." David's voice became gentle and affectionate. He began recording a voice letter for his daughter. Chloe held her breath, listening to her father's every word. Mixed in with the recording was the faint sound of a television from a distance, but she didn't pay it much mind, focused as she was on her father's voice. Just then, the sharp click of a key in a lock was heard on the tape. "Why did you send so little money this month?" Along with the sound of the door opening, Chloe's expression froze. It was, without a doubt, the voice of her mother, Sarah Anderson. "Sarah, business at the shop has been really slow lately." David's voice was timid, followed by a piercing shout. "If you can't make it, you have to find a way. What about Chloe's tuition and living expenses over there?" Sarah's voice was as cold as ice, as sharp as a blade. It wasn't the gentle mother from her memories. "Or are you waiting for my life insurance payout? What's the point of living if you're so useless?" Chloe's knuckles turned white. The tape kept playing, but her hands grew numb, and she could no longer hear anything. "Nan," Chloe called to her grandmother, her lips pale. "When Dad passed away, Mom was in America, wasn't she?" Her Nan tilted her head, thinking. "I believe so, but I have a vague memory she came back to Australia a few times. Very rushed trips." "Why do you ask?" "Really, Nan?" Chloe gripped her grandmother's hand tightly. "Are you sure? Mom came back to Australia around that time?" "Oh, it was so long ago, dear. I don't remember clearly. I think she might have, a few times." Nan shook her head, uncertain. Chloe frantically rummaged through the box. Underneath a pile of cassettes, an old spiral notebook fell out. Sarah's back. "I'm scared now." Chloe's hands trembled like a leaf in the wind. It was her father's last journal entry, just days before he died. On the morning of December 27th, after confirming that her father's old residence had been demolished to build a new apartment complex, Chloe went straight to the public inquiries counter at the NSW Police Headquarters in Parramatta. "My father passed away in May 2003. His name was David Anderson. I want to know who the lead investigator on his case was." The officer at the desk typed on his keyboard with a weary expression. "May 2003. David Anderson." That case was closed. Conclusion was suicide due to loneliness. The officer stared at the screen, looking uncomfortable. "It's been 7 years. We'll have to retrieve the old file. It will take some time." Chloe sat in a corner of the room, waiting anxiously for 2 hours. Finally, the officer called her over, holding a piece of paper. The detective in charge at the time was a Bruce Miller, but he's retired now. "We've managed to find a phone number for him. Here." Chloe took the slip of paper, her palm sweating as she hurried out of the building. "Hello, is this Mr. Bruce Miller?" "Yes, speaking. My name is Chloe Anderson. I'm the daughter of David Anderson." On the other end of the line, there was a heavy silence. David Anderson, the case in Parramatta, 2003, wasn't it? Mr. Miller's voice deepened. "Yes, that's right. I'm calling to ask you a few things about my father. That case. It still bothers me to this day." Chloe's heart pounded. "What do you mean, sir? Why does it bother you?" "Back then, a neighbor mentioned that his wife would visit occasionally, but we were told she was in the U.S., so we dismissed it." Mr. Miller sighed. "Would you like to meet? I still have some of my old notes." On the 28th of December 2010, amidst the biting Sydney winter chill, Chloe stood in front of a community center in the suburb of Marrickville. As she arrived at the meeting point and looked around, a silver-haired man sitting on a park bench slowly stood up. "Are you Chloe?" Mr. Miller asked, pulling a hand from his pocket. The retired detective, 62, wore an old jacket, its shoulders heavy with the weight of time. "Yes, I am. Thank you so much for coming out in this cold weather." Chloe bowed her head slightly. Mr. Miller blew on his hands to warm them. "No need for formalities. I'm just a retired old bloke now. It's freezing out here. Let's go to that cafe over there." The two entered a small cafe next to the community center. As soon as they sat down, Mr. Miller pulled a manila folder from inside his jacket and placed it on the table. "What's this, Mr. Miller?" Chloe asked, her eyes fixed on the folder. Mr. Miller fiddled with it sadly. "Crime scene photos and my personal notebook. I'm not supposed to have these, but this case has been a thorn in my side for 7 years." Mr. Miller took out a few faded photographs and an old notebook. Chloe's gaze was immediately drawn to the photos. The apartment where her father had spent his final days was laid bare. On the floor, 2 empty whiskey bottles lay on their sides. On a table, a glass of water, half full. Your father was discovered around 3 p.m. on the 15th of May, 2003. A neighbor called the police after not seeing any sign of him for a few days. Mr. Miller put on his reading glasses and opened his notebook. Time of death was estimated to be between the night of the 13th and the early morning of the 14th of May. The official cause was listed as an acute myocardial infarction. Chloe bit her lip, studying the final traces of her father in the photos. Mr. Miller pointed to another picture. But there was something strange at the scene. It was a close-up shot of a glass tumbler. His voice grew lower. "In this glass, we found a large concentration of sleeping pill residue. Because of that, we initially investigated it as a potential homicide." "Sleeping pills? You mean it could have been murder?" Chloe's voice trembled. "Mr." Miller frowned, looking troubled. "At the time, we contacted your mother. She told us her husband suffered from chronic insomnia and regularly used sleeping pills. Since she was in the U.S., we took her statement over the phone. That statement effectively ruled out the possibility of homicide." Hearing this, Chloe slammed her hand on the table. "That's ridiculous. My father never took sleeping pills. Not once." Mr. Miller looked at Chloe, surprised. "Are you sure? Perhaps he took them without your knowledge." "I'm absolutely certain. My dad hated taking medicine. He wouldn't even take a Panadol for a bad cold." Faced with Chloe's firm conviction, Mr. Miller slowly nodded. "I thought something was off back then, too. A neighbor did state that his wife visited from time to time. Who was that neighbor? Can I meet them now?" Chloe leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "Mr.?" Miller looked up at the ceiling, trying to remember. It was a Helen Langley. She lived in apartment 1203 on the same floor. They've probably moved since that block was demolished. I don't know if we can find her. We have to find her. Please, Mr. Miller, you have to help me." Chloe stood up abruptly. The two immediately caught a taxi to the Parramatta area. After asking around, they finally located Mrs. Langley's new home, an older unit in North Mead. The doorbell chimed. Helen Langley, a woman of 68, opened the door with a wary look. "Yes? Can I help you? I'm the daughter of David Anderson. He used to live in apartment 1,205 inches, the old Parramatta complex, back in 2003. Do you remember him?" Mrs. Langley's expression immediately tensed. "Oh, him. His sudden passing was such a shock. Mrs. Langley, before my father died, did you notice anything unusual? Anything at all, please, tell me." Chloe took Mrs. Langley's weathered hands in her own. Mrs. Langley avoided her gaze and spoke hesitantly. "About a month before he passed, I saw a young woman coming and going from his apartment. A young woman? What did she look like? Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. Mrs. Langley squinted, trying to recall. She was short and always wore a hat pulled down low. I never got a clear look at her face. But it wasn't just once or twice. I saw her many times. Mr. Miller, standing beside them, interjected with a sharp gaze. Did you ever see a man? A strange man, for instance? A man, I'm not sure, but I think I saw her getting out of a car with a man in the car park late one night. Mrs. Langley's words left Chloe's mind a blank. Did Dad have another woman, or were those two people her mother? She was utterly confused. Chloe said goodbye to Mrs. Langley and left with Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, I heard my father's shop was near here. That's right, in a row of small shops near the Western Sydney University campus. Let's go there. The pair hurried towards the street near the university. Chloe stopped in front of an old stationery shop. Excuse me, she said, stepping inside to ask the middle-aged man reading a newspaper behind the counter. Back in 2003, did you know a Mr. David Anderson? He ran the electronics repair shop around here. The man looked up. David Anderson? Yeah, his shop was right next to mine. You're his daughter? Yes. I wanted to know how he was living back then. Mr. Kevin Jones, the 8-year-old shop owner, stood up and looked Chloe over. He clicked his tongue, reminiscing. His daughter? Ah, he was always boasting about his girl studying in America. Sir, before my dad passed away, did you notice anything unusual about him? Mr. Jones was silent for a moment, then spoke heavily. A week before he died, he suddenly told me he was thinking of closing up the shop. I asked him what was wrong, but he just gave me a sad smile. Mr. Jones hesitated. Chloe's heart ached. Night was beginning to fall over the city. Sir, the phone company said it's been 7 years, so they don't have the call records anymore, Chloe said, stepping out of a telco store, her voice full of disappointment. Mr. Miller was rummaging through his pockets sadly when he seemed to remember something, his eyes widening. Chloe, wait. I think we missed something. What detail? Back then, I sent a request to the Department of Home Affairs to check the entry records for your mother, Sarah Anderson. And? Were there any records? Chloe clutched her phone tightly. Mr. Miller clenched his fist. Before we got a response, the case was closed. The autopsy result was a heart attack, so my superiors ordered the investigation to be halted, meaning they never checked if my mother was in Australia at that time. Chloe's hands turned pale. Mr. Miller said decisively, That's right. We have to start again by checking Sarah Anderson's travel history. If she was in Australia at that time, this is a completely different story. On the 30th of December 2010, in stark contrast to the festive year-end atmosphere on the streets, the air inside the Department of Home Affairs office was heavy and cold. Chloe sat in the waiting area, clutching a numbered ticket and nervously tapping her foot. After nearly an hour, the chime sounded. Now serving customer number 154 at counter 3. Chloe jumped up and rushed to the counter, presenting her ID. I'd like to check the entry and exit records for my mother, Sarah Anderson, from 2002 to 2003. The staff member looked at the computer screen and then shook their head coolly. Travel records can only be accessed by the individual themselves. Even family members are not permitted. My father has passed away, and I need to confirm if my mother was in Australia at the time. Please, can you help me? Chloe pleaded, but the staff member remained firm, staring at their screen. Regardless of the reason, regulations state that no one other than the individual can view these records, unless there is an official request from a law enforcement agency with a warrant. Chloe bit her lip until she tasted blood, leaving the office in a daze. The cold winter wind slapped her cheeks. Instead of going back to her Nan's in Newtown, Chloe slumped down in a corner of a cafe across the street. She shakily took out her phone and made an international call to her mother in Virginia, USA. "Hello? Mum, it's me." "Chloe, did you get back to Australia safely? Is Nan well?" Sarah's voice was as gentle as always. "Yes, everyone's fine. Mum, can I ask you something?" Chloe toyed with her cold coffee, struggling to find the words. "Back when Dad died, did you come back to Australia at all?" On the other end of the line, there was a suffocating silence. "What are you talking about? I was in the U.S. then. I was with you. Why are you asking such a strange thing? Really? You didn't come back? Not even once?" "Of course not. Why are you suddenly asking about that? Is something wrong?" Sarah's voice had a slight edge to it. "No, it's just, I was cleaning out some of Dad's things and had a few questions. Chloe, what's past is past. Why dig it up? Your father is gone. Those of us who are still here have to move on. Don't overthink things. Take care of yourself." "Okay, Mum, I'll hang up now." Chloe ended the call and put her phone on the table. The subtle tremor in her mother's voice had ignited a fire of suspicion within her. Leaving the cafe, Chloe walked heavily back to her Nan's house. She locked herself in her room and reread her father's old journal. She read every page, every line of his thoughts. Her hand stopped on the entry for the 3rd of November, 2002. Sarah called, furious, asked why I changed the beneficiary on the insurance policy. I told her I wanted to leave it for Chloe. She screamed, asking if I was wishing she'd die soon. I'm scared. Chloe's pupils dilated. This was the first time she knew her father had tried to change the insurance beneficiary. The next morning, as soon as it was light, Chloe sought out her grandmother. Nan retrieved a stack of yellowed documents from deep within a cabinet. "These are the insurance papers from when we were arranging your father's affairs. I kept them just in case." The documents listed the insurance company, Astra Life, and the name of the consultant, Mark Taylor. Chloe immediately called Astra Life's head office to ask about Mr. Taylor. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Mark Taylor is currently based at our Sydney CBD branch." Chloe took a taxi to the city. Upon arrival, she hurried to the reception desk. "Excuse me, is Mark Taylor here? He handled my father's insurance policy." A moment later, a well-dressed man of about 47 emerged from a consultation room. "You were looking for me?" "Hello, I'm Chloe Anderson, David Anderson's daughter. You handled his policy in 2003, is that correct?" Mr. Taylor's expression immediately tensed. "David Anderson, I remember. His passing was so sudden, I was very shocked. Mr. Taylor, is it true that before he died, my father wanted to change the beneficiary of his policy?" Mr. Taylor looked around nervously. "It's not very convenient to talk out here. Please, come inside." The two entered an empty consultation room. Mr. Taylor closed the door, sighed, and sat down. "In late 2002, your father came to see me. He said he wanted to change the beneficiary from his wife to his daughter. He seemed very agitated." "He did? Then why wasn't it changed?" "Because we needed to prepare the paperwork, and since you were overseas, some necessary documents were missing, like proof of family relationship. Your father made an appointment for May 15th to bring the documents in." Mr. Taylor hesitated, looking down. "He passed away the day before that appointment." Chloe's hands trembled violently. "Did he say anything at the time? A reason, maybe?" Mr. Taylor closed his eyes, recalling that day. "Your father said, if I die, this money must go to my daughter. Under no circumstances can my wife receive it." Why would he say that?" "I asked him the same thing, but he wouldn't answer. He just looked desperate, as if he knew something was about to happen." Chloe leaned back wearily in her chair, her mind a tangled mess. "So what happened to the insurance money in the end?" Because he passed away before the changes were finalized, legally, the payout went to the original beneficiary, his wife, $500,000. Chloe's vision went dark. The truth that her mother had been living comfortably in America with that money was a sharp, stabbing pain. Stumbling out of the office, Chloe returned to her Nan's house. She curled up in a corner of her room, frantically flipping through her father's journal again. Her eyes stopped on the page dated the 15th of December, 2002. Heard from an acquaintance here that there are rumors Sarah is getting close with a deacon at her church. It's called the New Light Community Church, I think. Chloe shakily took out her phone and opened a web browser. She searched for New Light Community Church and found the website for a church in Fairfax, Virginia. With bloodshot eyes, Chloe scrolled through the church's history and staff pages. When she found a photo from a Christmas service in 2002, her heart felt like it stopped. In the photo, her mother, Sarah Anderson, was linking arms intimately with a strange man, smiling brightly. The caption underneath clearly identified him: Deacon Paul Turner. Chloe saved the name Paul Turner in her notes. Just then, her phone rang. "Hello, is that Chloe?" "It's Kevin Jones, from the stationery shop." It was the shop owner she had met a few days ago. His voice on the other end of the line was unusually shaky. "Mr. Jones? What is it?" "Actually, there was something I didn't tell you that day. It's been bothering me. I haven't been able to sleep." Chloe held her breath. "What are you talking about? Can we meet?" "It's not something to discuss over the phone. I'll be right there." "Where are you?" "I'm at the shop. I'll close up and wait for you." Chloe grabbed her coat and rushed out of the room. On the morning of the 2nd of January 2011, in contrast to the joyful New Year spirit, Chloe stood before the stationery shop in Parramatta with a tense expression. She pushed open the glass door and went inside. Mr. Jones, behind the counter, startled and stood up. "You're here." His face was even more grim than a few days prior. He led Chloe into the back storeroom and shut the roller door firmly. "Mr. Jones, why didn't you tell me this before?" Chloe asked first, her voice accusatory. "Mr." Jones slumped into an old chair and sighed. "David made me promise," he said. "Under no circumstances are you to tell Chloe." "What? What have you been hiding from me?" "In 2003, David's wife came to the shop several times. Not just once or twice, but quite often. I saw her with my own eyes." Chloe's heart plummeted. "My mother? Are you sure? You didn't mistake her for someone else?" "I wasn't sure at first either. But one day, in broad daylight, I saw her standing in front of the shop with a strange man." "A man?" "A tall man, wearing glasses. They were talking about something very seriously, which I thought was odd." Mr. Jones stood up and retrieved a dusty CD case from a shelf. "I'd just bought a digital camera back then to take pictures for the shop. I burned the photo files onto a CD to save them. Lucky I still have it." Mr. Jones put the CD into the shop's computer and opened the file explorer. The old PC whirred and groaned as it started up. Mr. Jones clicked open a folder buried deep in the hard drive. Chloe's eyes were glued to the screen, and there it was. On the screen was an image of her mother, Sarah Anderson, and a strange man standing together in front of her father's old, run-down shop. The tall man, with gold-rimmed glasses, had his hand on her mother's shoulder, whispering something to her. "Do you know who this man is?" Chloe pointed at the screen, her finger trembling. "No idea. But when I showed this photo to David, his face went as white as a sheet." "What did my dad say?" "He begged me to keep it an absolute secret from his Chloe. And, Mr." Jones paused, swallowing hard. "And what?" He said if anything happened to him, then I should give this photo to Chloe. He said that just a few days before he died. Chloe's hands shook. Had her father foreseen his own death? "Why didn't you say anything for 7 years?" "Because David asked me to. It was like a final wish." But when you came looking, trying to find the truth, I felt I couldn't stay silent any longer. I'm sorry." Chloe said nothing, taking a photo of the image on the screen with her phone. She nodded at Mr. Jones and ran out of the shop, immediately calling Bruce Miller. "Mr. Miller, it's me. I have conclusive evidence." "Evidence? What is it, Chloe? Tell me." "My mother was in Australia in 2003. I have a photo of her. She was with a strange man." On the other end of the line, Mr. Miller seemed to hold his breath. "I have a trusted former colleague who's still on the force. His name is Liam Evans, a detective sergeant in the homicide squad. For now, I'll ask him for some unofficial advice. If we have new evidence, we might be able to reopen the investigation." "Really? Is that possible?" "Because there's clear new evidence, it's absolutely possible. We now have just cause to reopen the case." Chloe returned to her Nan's house, fraught with worry, waiting for news from Mr. Miller. 5 long days passed. Finally, on January 7th, Mr. Miller called. "Chloe, we have a result." Chloe's heart beat like a drum. Sarah Anderson entered Australia a total of 4 times between October 2002 and May 2003. 4 times? That many? Her last entry was on the 12th of May 2003, and she departed on May 14th. Chloe's vision went black. She felt dizzy. Her father's time of death was estimated between the night of the 13th and the early morning of the 14th of May. It coincided terrifyingly with her mother's time in Australia. "Mr. Miller, this." "I know. I've told Detective Evans everything. He said he will look into formally reopening the investigation." Chloe's hand trembled so much she almost dropped her phone. "Let's meet and talk. Detective Evans wants to see you tomorrow as a witness." The next morning, Chloe walked heavily into an interview room at the police station. Detective Sergeant Liam Evans, 38, had a sharp gaze and a crisp, no-nonsense demeanor. "Chloe Anderson, Mr. Miller has told me everything. I've also seen the travel records myself." Detective Evans spread a thick file on the table. "The fact that Sarah Anderson was in Australia on the day of the incident is true, but that alone isn't enough. To prove a murder charge, we need more solid, physical evidence. What more do you need?" "Back then, the glass of water at the scene contained sleeping pill residue. We need to find the source of those pills." Detective Evans stood up, his expression determined. "I'm going to canvass every pharmacy in the Parramatta area to see if there are any records of sleeping pill sales between May 12th and 14th, 2003, even if finding 7-year-old records is a long shot." Chloe bowed her head. "Thank you. Thank you so much. It's too early for thanks. We need to find that proof first." From that day on, Detective Evans began to comb through the pharmacies in the Parramatta area. Most had either thrown away or lost their logbooks from 7 years ago. But on January 9th, an excited Detective Evans called Chloe. "Chloe, do you know a place called Springwood Pharmacy in a small laneway behind the Parramatta markets?" "No, I've never heard of it. The pharmacist there is a Mrs. Nguyen, about 60 years old. She's meticulous and has kept all her old handwritten logbooks in storage." Chloe's heart hammered. "Did you find anything?" "In the 2003 logbook, I found an entry for a cash sale of sleeping pills on May 12th. "May 12th? That's the day Sarah Anderson arrived." Chloe held her breath. "What does the log say?" "Mrs. Nguyen had a habit of noting down the reason for purchasing sleeping pills to prevent abuse. The entry for that day reads, 'Middle-aged woman said it was for her husband's insomnia.' Can that prove it was my mother? It's been 7 years. The pharmacist doesn't remember the customer's face. But in terms of timing and the stated reason, it aligns perfectly with Sarah Anderson." Detective Evans paused for a moment. "Compiling all the evidence we now have, we have sufficient grounds to proceed with a formal investigation. I'm going to report to my superiors and list Sarah Anderson as the primary suspect and begin the process of summoning her. Chloe closed her eyes tightly. The horrific prospect that her own mother might have killed her father was slowly becoming a reality. And one more thing, Detective Evans's voice became low and conspiratorial. That photo from Mr. Jones, the man with the glasses. We've identified him as Paul Turner, a deacon at the New Light Community Church in Virginia. Have you looked into him? We've also checked his travel history. He entered Australia on the 11th of May, 2003, and departed on May 15th. It's almost as if he was on the same flights as Sarah Anderson. Chloe clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms. They came back together and left together. It appears so. Whether he was merely her lover or had a deeper involvement in this case is something we now have to determine. After hanging up, Chloe stared blankly out the window. The night sky was pitch black, without a single star. She didn't want to suspect her mother, but all the evidence was pointing towards a tragic conclusion. On the 15th of January 2011, the atmosphere in the Homicide Squad's meeting room was tense enough to cut with a knife. Detective Sergeant Liam Evans placed a thick report on the table, his lips pressed into a thin line. It was the moment the death of David Anderson was officially reclassified from an unattended death to a suspected homicide. We'll summon Sarah Anderson as a person of interest. Send the request for cooperation through the U.S. Embassy immediately, the squad commander instructed decisively. Detective Evans nodded and left the room. That afternoon, Detective Evans received the final confirmation on the identity of the man in the photo from Mr. Jones. A comparison with his passport photo yielded a 99% match for Paul Turner. Detective Evans immediately called Chloe. "Chloe, we've double-checked Paul Turner's travel records." "Yes, Detective Evans?" "What did you find?" "He entered on the 10th of May, 2003, and departed on the 15th. Sarah Anderson entered on the 12th and left on the 14th. Their time in Australia overlaps completely." Chloe bit her lip, letting out a sound like a pained groan. "They planned to come back together. It seems so. We need to determine if Mr. Otter Turner was simply a lover or an accomplice. He's currently in the U.S. We've sent a request to local police to locate him." After the call, Chloe stared at her phone, lost in thought. The words of the neighbor, Helen Langley, flashed in her mind the mention of seeing a man with the woman in the low-brimmed hat. Without hesitation, Chloe took a taxi back to Northmead. She rang the doorbell at Mrs. Langley's home. A moment later, the door opened. "Oh, it's you again. Is everything all right?" Mrs. Langley invited Chloe inside, concerned. "Mrs. Langley, I'm so sorry to bother you again, but could I ask one more thing? It's very important." Chloe took out her phone and displayed the photo from Mr. Jones next to Paul Turner's passport photo. "Have you ever seen this man? The one who was with the woman who used to visit my father?" Mrs. Langley adjusted her glasses and stared at the photos. She squinted, trying to dredge up a 7-year-old memory. "I saw the woman clearly, but the man—" "Mrs." Langley shook her head. "Uncertain. I don't remember him well. I got a glimpse of him in the car park late one night, but it was dark. I couldn't see his face." "What about his build, or his height? Can you remember anything? I think he was quite tall." "Oh, it's been 7 years. I've forgotten most of it. I'm sorry, dear." Chloe hid her disappointment and bowed her head. "It's okay. Thank you, Mrs. Langley. If you remember anything, please call me." Leaving Mrs. Langley's house, Chloe immediately called Bruce Miller. "Mr. Miller, do you remember where my father's funeral was held?" "I believe it was at a church in Parramatta. Why do you ask?" "I want to see if the priest who conducted the service is still there. I'm looking for more clues. It's been almost 8 years. You could try asking the parish office." Feeling like she was grasping at straws, Chloe went to the church. At the parish office, she received surprising news. Father Michael O'Connell, who had presided over the 2003 funeral, was still serving there. "Could I please speak with Father O'Connell for a moment?" A short while later, a silver-haired priest in his 70s entered the office with a kind smile. "You were looking for me, my child?" "Hello, Father. I'm David Anderson's daughter. I was told you conducted my father's funeral in 2003. A shadow of sadness crossed Father O'Connell's face. "Ah, David Anderson. I remember. He passed so suddenly, and so alone, a great tragedy. Father, do you remember who attended the funeral?" The priest looked into the distance, recalling. "There were a few neighbors and some of the local shopkeepers. But there was one strange thing I still remember to this day." "Strange? What was it, Father?" "His wife never showed up for the funeral. I heard she was overseas, but for a wife not to return when her husband dies, it's very rare." Chloe's hands trembled. "My mother didn't attend the funeral?" "That's right. And you weren't here either. It was a funeral without any primary mourners, which made it all the more heartbreaking for me." Chloe shut her eyes tightly. The memory of her mother calling her, crying, telling her not to come back for the funeral, came flooding back. "You're in the middle of your semester. Traveling will affect your studies. Your father would have wanted you to finish." Her mother's choked voice at the time. "And a few days later, his wife made an international call to me," the priest continued carefully. "A phone call? My mother?" "Yes, but the call was very strange. Her husband had just passed, yet there wasn't a hint of grief in her voice." "What did she say?" She asked in great detail about the procedures for claiming the life insurance, where to get the death certificate, where to send the forms, when she would receive the money. Her tone was very cold and clinical. Chloe's face went cold. "Thank you, Father. Thank you for telling me." Stumbling out of the church, Chloe shakily called Detective Evans. Upon hearing the priest's shocking testimony, Detective Evans let out a heavy sigh. "The pieces are all pointing in one direction. The preparations to summon your mother are almost complete. We just need to make the call." 2 days later, on January 20th, the unexpected happened. Sarah Anderson suddenly boarded a flight and returned to Australia without any notice. As soon as she cleared immigration at Sydney Airport, she voluntarily presented herself to the police as if someone had been waiting for her. At the same time, a short text message arrived on Chloe's phone. "Chloe, it's Mum. I've come back to Australia to clear up this misunderstanding. Let's meet." Chloe held her phone, staring blankly at the screen for a long time. Shortly after, Detective Evans called, his voice urgent. "Chloe, have you heard? Your mother has turned herself in. She's being questioned now. What is she saying? What's her excuse? She admits she was in the country at the time, but claims it was because she was worried about her husband's poor health and just came back for a secret visit. That's it. That ridiculous excuse? Regarding Paul Turner, she insists he's just an acquaintance from her charity work at the church, that they never met in Australia and have no relationship." Chloe gritted her teeth. "It's all lies. That's absolutely impossible, I know. But without physical evidence, we can't press her further. For now, we'll have to see how the investigation unfolds." After hanging up, Chloe looked out at the Sydney nightscape flashing past her window. She couldn't understand what her mother was thinking, coming back to Australia on her own. Was her desire to clear up the misunderstanding genuine, or just another act to escape the law? Chloe's insides were a knot of turmoil. On the 22nd of January 2011, the atmosphere in the Homicide Squad office was electric. Detective Sergeant Liam Evans tapped his fingers on the table, staring at Sarah Anderson's written statement, deep in thought. The conflicting testimony, the anxious eyes, and above all, the 7-year gap it all pricked at his detective's intuition. Something was wrong. This script is too clean, too rehearsed. Detective Evans muttered to himself. He drafted a request to the forensics lab to reanalyze David Anderson's 2003 autopsy report and to conduct a detailed component analysis of the residue in the glass recovered from the scene. These two things will give us the answer. A week later, the analysis report from the forensics lab came back, and its contents were staggering. Detective Evans's hands trembled as he read it. The concentration of sleeping pills in David Anderson's blood at the time of death was at a lethal level. Furthermore, a specific compound was detected that, when reacting with alcohol, causes respiratory failure. The end of the report was highlighted in red. Estimated dosage used is more than 3 times the normal therapeutic dose for insomnia. Detective Evans immediately called Chloe. "Chloe, we have the results from the forensics lab. Is it a good time to talk?" "Yes, Detective. What is it?" "The level of sleeping pills in your father's blood was more than 3 times the normal dose. This is not an amount someone could accidentally take." Chloe's breathing became rapid. "So someone intentionally gave it to him? The probability of him taking such a large dose himself, especially with alcohol, is virtually 0. The signs of a deliberate homicide are very clear now." Chloe clutched her phone and said decisively, "Detective Evans, I have something I want to give you. It's my father's cassette tape. There's a recording on the back." "A cassette tape? What's on it?" "At first, I just thought it was my dad practicing English. But in the middle of the recording, you can hear a door open, and the TV in the living room was also recorded." "The TV?" "Yes, the voice of the 7 p.m. ABC newsreader on May 13th. It's very clear. Right after that, my mother comes in and starts yelling. That night, your mother was in the house. Can you bring it in immediately? That could be a crucial piece of evidence." After hanging up, Chloe ran back to her nan's, retrieved the tape she had hidden safely in a drawer, and took a taxi to the police headquarters, her heart pounding. In the interview room, Chloe shakily handed the tape to Detective Evans. "Here, I think my dad was recording himself practicing English right before he died. I'll send this to the audio forensics unit immediately. We need to prove scientifically that the voice is Sarah Anderson's." 3 days later, on January 25th, the audio analysis report was on Detective Evans's desk. Reading it, a cold smile played on his lips. The female voice on the tape and the voice analysis of Sarah Anderson show a 97.3% match. "Nowhere left to run," Detective Evans said, standing up abruptly. "Reclassify Sarah Anderson as a suspect. Issue a summons for immediate questioning." That afternoon, Sarah Anderson sat in the interrogation room, her face pale. Detective Evans said nothing, simply pressing play on a cassette player. "Why did you send so little money this month? If you can't make it, you have to find a way. What about Chloe's tuition and living expenses over there?" The piercing shouts echoed through the room. Sarah's face went white, her lips trembling. "Or are you waiting for my life insurance payout? What's the point of living if you're so useless?" Detective Evans pressed stop and looked directly at her. "Is this your voice?" Sarah avoided his gaze, shaking her head frantically. "No, that's not my voice. It's a fake." Detective Evans threw the forensic report on the table. "This is the audio analysis report. It's a 97.3% match to your voice. Do you still want to deny it?" Sarah's eyes darted around. She bit her lip, silent for a long moment, then lowered her head and changed her story. "Yes, I was there. But I didn't kill him. He took the pills himself." "He took them himself? Such a large dose?" "My husband was severely depressed. He was always talking about wanting to die, saying his life was hell. I came back secretly to try and talk him out of it." Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. "But in the end, I couldn't stop him. Because of that guilt, I couldn't tell Chloe. I've hidden it for 7 years. Please, believe me." Detective Evans crossed his arms, looking at her with a skeptical eye. Are there any official medical records showing David Anderson was diagnosed with depression? He wouldn't go to the doctor, but the symptoms were obvious. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Can you prove that? Sarah fell silent, her head bowed. Detective Evans left the room and called Chloe, who was waiting in the hallway. Chloe, your mother is claiming your father was severely depressed. Can you try to find any of his medical records? Depressed? My dad wouldn't even take a pill for a cold. I'll check. Chloe immediately went to the GP clinic in Parramatta her father used to visit. I'd like a complete copy of the medical records for a patient named David Anderson, from 2000 to 2003. Holding the file, Chloe trembled with rage. There were no records related to psychiatric care or prescriptions for sleeping pills. Only a few entries for high blood pressure medication. Chloe returned to the police station with the medical records. Detective Evans, look at this. My father never saw a doctor for depression, and he was never prescribed sleeping pills. What my mother said is a complete lie. Detective Evans examined the records and nodded. You're right. Only prescriptions for blood pressure. No antidepressants or sleeping pills. Detective Evans stood up, holding the file, his face resolute. Based on these records, the audio recording, and the autopsy results, we are proceeding with the immediate arrest of Sarah Anderson. On January 28th, cold handcuffs were snapped onto Sarah Anderson's wrists. Immediately after her arrest, she requested a lawyer and refused to say another word. Detective Evans went out to the hallway and called Bruce Miller. Mr. Miller, we've arrested Sarah Anderson. She's in custody now. Good work, Liam. You've done a great thing. What about this Paul Turner fellow? The likelihood of him being an accomplice is very high. We've requested an international arrest warrant. His location in the U.S. has been confirmed. We'll be coordinating with the FBI to apprehend him soon. On the other end of the line, Mr. Miller let out a sigh of relief. 7 years. If I had just investigated a little more thoroughly back then, it wouldn't have taken so long. It's not your fault, sir. Their deception was too meticulous. The real work starts now. Hanging up, Detective Evans looked out the window. A bitter winter wind was blowing, but the truth of the case was finally beginning to break through the ice. On the 3rd of February 2011, thanks to close cooperation with Interpol, Paul Turner was arrested in Virginia and extradited to Australia, arriving at Sydney Airport. Despite wearing a hat and mask that obscured his face, his anxiety was palpable as he was cuffed and led to a police vehicle. The air in the interrogation room was thick with tension. Detective Sergeant Liam Evans stared at Paul Turner, seated opposite him. Mr. Turner, what exactly is your relationship with Sarah Anderson? Paul Turner avoided his gaze and shook his head. No relationship. We're just acquaintances from church. We do charity work together. Detective Evans scoffed and pulled a photograph from the file, placing it on the table. It was the decisive photo from 7 years ago, provided by Mr. Jones. Take a look at this photo. It was taken in front of David Anderson's shop in May 2003. You and Mrs. Anderson look very close, don't you? Paul Turner's pupils contracted sharply. And this is your travel history, Detective Evans added, delivering another blow. You entered on the 11th of May 2003 and departed on the 15th. Sarah Anderson entered on the 12th and departed on the 14th. Your time in Australia overlaps strangely. Is this also a coincidence? Paul Turner bit his lip until it bled. Confess, what is your relationship with Sarah Anderson? After a long silence, Paul Turner sighed and began to speak. We were lovers. Since when? Since early 2002. We met at church and developed feelings for each other. Detective Evans leaned forward, applying pressure. Why did you come to Australia with Sarah Anderson in May 2003? What was the purpose? Sarah. She said she was coming back to get her husband to sign divorce papers. I was worried, and I also wanted to visit Sydney, so I came with her. A visit? You think I'll believe that? Yes. Sarah said she would sort things out quickly, and then we could travel together. Detective Evans tapped the table in frustration. Mr. Turner, on the night of the 13th of May, 2003, where were you and what were you doing? Paul Turner's face tensed. I was in my hotel room, alone. Alone? Detective Evans played his trump card, an old, yellowed piece of paper. When we searched the storage unit under your house, we found your 2003 telecommunications bills. You're very meticulous, keeping everything. Paul Turner's eyes widened in fear. This bill shows that at 11 p.m. on the 13th of May, 2003, you made a 7-minute international call to a number in Australia. This number belongs to David Anderson's home phone. You say you were alone in your hotel room. Why were you calling someone else's house? Paul Turner was silent. What was that call about? If you don't tell the truth, you'll be treated as an accomplice. Paul Turner squeezed his eyes shut. After a long silence, he spoke in a trembling voice. It was Sarah who called. She said everything was done and told me to get on the earliest flight the next morning. Everything was done? I thought she meant the divorce agreement was settled. Detective Evans leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. David Anderson's time of death was between the night of the 13th and the early morning of the 14th of May. The time Sarah called to say everything was done coincides terrifyingly. Paul Turner's face was ashen. I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. I just thought she had gotten the divorce papers signed. Really? You had no idea Sarah Anderson had killed her husband? Yes. I swear I didn't know. When I heard later that David had died, I thought it was strange, but I tried to ignore it. I thought, there's no way Sarah could do something like that. Detective Evans gave a cold laugh and stood up. Mr. Turner, at the very least, you became aware of the circumstances of the case after the fact. Whether you are guilty of concealing a crime or being an accomplice, that will be for the Director of Public Prosecutions to decide. On February 10th, the DPP charged Sarah Anderson with murder. Paul Turner, due to a lack of direct evidence of his involvement in the murder, was released on bail pending further investigation. Not long after, the trial began, with Chloe in attendance. The Crown prosecutor presented the cassette tape provided by Chloe as a key piece of evidence. The accused, Sarah Anderson, on the 13th of May, 2003, administered a lethal dose of sleeping pills mixed with alcohol to her husband, David Anderson, causing his death by acute poisoning. Sarah's barrister immediately objected. Objection. This tape could have been damaged or maliciously edited. It cannot be admitted as evidence. The judge looked towards the prosecutor. The Crown's response? We have had the tape professionally analyzed. The results show no signs of tampering or editing whatsoever. The prosecutor confidently presented the analysis report to the court. The barrister's face fell. During the trial, the prosecutor presented another document from the forensics lab. They had managed to restore a damaged audio segment at the end of the tape. We will now play the restored recording. In the courtroom, after a burst of static, Sarah Anderson's chilling voice rang out. If you just disappeared, all our problems would be solved. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Chloe covered her mouth with both hands, swallowing back tears. Sarah Anderson sat in the dock, her face buried in her hands. It was nothing short of an undeniable confession. The prosecutor stood to deliver his final closing argument. The accused, Sarah Anderson, motivated by her husband's $500,000 life insurance policy, meticulously planned this crime. When she learned her husband intended to change the beneficiary to their daughter, the accused hastily acted before the change could be finalized. The prosecutor held up a document. The accused colluded with her lover, Paul Turner, to create an alibi, took the insurance money that was the price of her husband's life, fled to the United States, and used that money to enjoy a new life. This is an act devoid of all humanity. The judge looked at Sarah with a stern expression. Does the accused have any final words? Sarah slowly lifted her head, tear stains dry on her cheeks. She looked at her daughter in the gallery and struggled to speak. Chloe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just those few short words. On the 15th of April 2011, at the sentencing hearing in the Supreme Court of New South Wales, the silence was suffocating. The judge read the verdict. The accused, Sarah Anderson, is sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. As the sentence was handed down, Sarah showed no reaction, only bowing her head. She brought her cuffed hands to her face, glancing at Chloe in the gallery. Chloe did not look away, meeting her mother's gaze. Sarah weakly dropped her eyes and was led away by the guards. There was no appeal. Chloe sat alone in the empty courtroom, quietly bearing the weight of a truth that had been buried for 7 years. In May 2011, after Sarah Anderson was imprisoned, Chloe, feeling a mixture of relief and emptiness, returned to her Nan's house. Standing before the door to the garage, she gripped the rusty handle, hesitating for a moment before resolutely pulling it open. In the air, thick with the smell of dust and mildew, her father's box of belongings sat alone. Chloe struggled to carry the box into the living room. Chloe, dear, what are you doing in there? Nan came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a tea towel. I'm sorting through Dad's things. It's time to let him go. Chloe tried to sound composed as she opened the box. The Walkman, the Old English Dictionary, and the dozens of cassettes lay dormant. Chloe took out each item one by one, then reached deep into the bottom of the box. She felt the rough texture of a bundle of papers. It was a stack of letters, held together by a yellowed rubber band. Chloe's hands trembled as she removed the band and opened the first letter. Her father's familiar handwriting appeared, blurring her vision. The 15th of May, 2000. Chloe, my girl, today you flew to America. Watching your back as you walked through the gate, waving goodbye, I just couldn't bring myself to leave. Tears welled in Chloe's eyes. Dad is going to start learning English, too. I'll study hard, and when I visit you in America, I'll be able to talk to you properly. Until then, make sure you eat well and stay healthy. Chloe bit her lip and turned to the next letter. The year 2001, 2002. Letters her father had written out of longing for his daughter, but perhaps to save money on postage, had never sent. The 10th of October, 2002. Chloe, to send your tuition money this month, Dad had to cash in his savings bonds. But don't you worry about me. Seeing you get a good education is my only dream. Chloe's hands shook. I've sent all my superannuation money over too. Business at the shop hasn't been great lately, but I didn't dare tell you. I was afraid my good girl would drop out of her studies and come running home. Chloe put the letter down and buried her face in her hands. The reality that her father had sacrificed so much for her to study abroad pressed on her chest like a boulder. Nan. Chloe looked up at her grandmother through a film of tears. What is it, dear? What's in the letters that's made you cry so? It was me. I was so selfish, demanding to study overseas. Dad didn't object. He just smiled and told me to go. But I never knew how hard he had to live. Nan came closer and rubbed her granddaughter's trembling back. That's the kind of man your father was. Even if his world was falling apart, he would never show his hardship to his children. Chloe opened the last letter. It was written in December 2002, a month before he died. Chloe, my girl. Lately, Dad has been so tired, both in body and spirit. But I shouldn't say these weak things to you. I'm fine, really, I am. You becoming a successful person is everything to me. Chloe clutched the letter to her chest and wept uncontrollably. Hot tears fell, smudging her father's words. A few days later, On a warm, sunny afternoon, Bruce Miller came to see Chloe. They met at the end of the lane and sat together on a park bench, sipping canned coffee. "Chloe, the long case is finally over." Mr. Miller watched the children playing, his voice tinged with sadness. "It's all thanks to you, sir. Without you, the truth would have been buried forever." "No, I'm the one who should feel ashamed and guilty." Mr. Miller lowered his head. "If I had investigated more thoroughly back then, we wouldn't have wasted 7 years. I should never have dismissed the neighbor's testimony." Chloe shook her head and took his hand. "It wasn't your fault. At the time, there was only circumstantial evidence, no proof. On the contrary, I'm so grateful that even after retiring, you held on to those files, Mr." Miller smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "Even after I took off the uniform, that case was a thorn in my side. I always had a feeling I'd missed something important. Now, I can finally rest easy. Because of you, my father's name has been cleared. You are my benefactor. I am truly grateful." In June 2011, Chloe, dressed in professional attire, went to the offices of Astra Life Insurance. As her father's sole legal heir, she initiated proceedings to recover the unjustly acquired funds. Following the court's ruling, the process to reclaim the insurance payout made to Sarah Anderson began. However, after 8 years, a large portion of the money had been spent. The actual amount recovered was only $300,000. The insurance agent handed her a folder and asked politely, "You've been through so much. This recovered sum, shall we transfer it to your nominated bank account?" Chloe looked out the window, thinking, "I want to donate all of it." "Excuse me? Donate it? The entire amount?" "Yes, to me, this money is too heavy to bear." Shortly after, Chloe went to the headquarters of a national children's charity. Sitting in the consultation room, Chloe spoke decisively. "I want to donate the full $300,000, but can I specify how it's used?" The representative, surprised, nodded. "Of course. You can make a designated bequest. Who would you like this money to help? Please use it to help middle-aged men living in solitude, especially those who live apart from their families without adequate care." To prevent more lonely deaths, Chloe's voice trembled. "With the remainder, please use it as a scholarship for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who are at risk of dropping out." "Yes, I understand. Shall we establish a fund in the donor's name?" Chloe shook her head and smiled faintly. "No. Please name the fund after my father, the David Anderson Foundation. I hope that the love my father never had the chance to give can be passed on to others in this way." The representative, moved, wrote down the name. "That is a noble and precious wish. We will ensure that your father's name shines, and that this money reaches those who need it most." Meanwhile, Paul Turner, having escaped the law due to insufficient evidence, found his life in ruins. His affair and immoral conduct were exposed within his community in the U.S. He was expelled from his church. Eventually, he had to leave Virginia, disappearing without a trace. One hot day in July, Chloe returned to Parramatta. In front of the old stationery shop, Mr. Jones was dusting, and he greeted her cheerfully. "Oh, Chloe, good to see you. You're looking much better." "Yes, I came to thank you, Mr. Jones." Chloe offered him a small gift box. "What's this? You didn't have to. It's just a small token of my appreciation. Thank you so much for that photo. Because of it, I was able to find the truth." Mr. Jones accepted the gift, scratching his head in embarrassment. I should have said something right away. I stayed silent for 7 years. I'm the one at fault." "No, my father told you not to." Mr. Jones was quiet for a moment, then looked back into his shop and said softly, "Actually, there was another reason I took that photo." "Oh? What was that?" 3 days before he died, David came to see me. He said, Kevin, mate, if anything happens to me, please give this photo to my Chloe. It's my last insurance policy. Chloe's eyes widened. My father really said that? He did. At the time, I told him off for talking such nonsense. But looking back now, maybe he sensed his own fate. He left behind one final piece of evidence for his daughter. Chloe quietly closed her eyes. The truth that her father, even in the face of death, had left a piece of the puzzle for his daughter made her heart ache. The 24th of December 2011, another Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year since the day she found her father's tape. Chloe wrapped her scarf tighter and opened the door to her Nan's house. "You're back. Is it cold out there?" Nan greeted her with a warm smile. "Nan, there's somewhere I need to go." Chloe stood before the garage. In her hands was her father's old Walkman, fitted with new batteries. She put on the headphones, inserted the tape that had been stopped for a year, and pressed play. After the soft hiss, her father's hesitant but warm voice spoke. "I miss my family." Chloe leaned against the cold wall and closed her eyes. The winter wind brushed against her flushed cheeks. "How are you doing, Chloe? Are you eating properly?" As the tape neared its end, through the static, her father's final words were heard. "I love you, Chloe. Always." From Chloe's closed eyes, hot tears traced paths down her cheeks. She pressed stop and stood there for a long time, as if the warmth of her father's voice still lingered in her ears. Chloe clutched the Walkman to her chest and stepped out of her grandmother's house. She looked up at the dark night sky. Against the strangely clear winter heavens, a single bright star twinkled, as if it were watching over her. Thank you for journeying with this story to the very end. If you leave a comment saying you finished listening, it would be a great source of encouragement. I hope your day also has moments of peace, and I hope you will consider subscribing and liking. Thank you.